Use it well. Use it for good.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to yet another one of my yap sessions. Let me take you down memory lane a bit before I start yapping. Imagine this. You're a younger me. Okay, imagine you're a kid, and you're absolutely in love with Star Wars. It's easy to get your Star Wars fix. You got hundreds of books, thousands of comics, a large collection of games, and even a few TV shows. This is the best you could ever ask for. It was easy being a Star Wars fan. Sure, you'd occasionally find that annoying person online that had a mental breakdown because the prequels ruined their childhood. They didn't, by the way. You're just fragile and probably lack media literacy. You're just frolicking in the fields of your Star Wars love and giving sacrifices to your Jar Jar shrine. And then you hear an interesting piece of news. George Lucas has sold Star Wars to Disney. At first, your young, death-stick-addled mind can't seem to connect the dots. Why would George sell his passion project? Wasn't he still executive producing the Clone Wars? Does this change anything about Star Wars? At first you go, no, it doesn't, because why would Disney get rid of LucasArts and Lucas Books? They were at least providing around 50% of the yearly Star Wars revenue through merchandise. And then the day hits. April 25th, 2014. I think everyone has had their first horrific event they experience, but this was yours. Disney took all those books, those games, everything you loved and went, none of this matters anymore, turd burglar! It was hinting at you from the beginning, yet you refused to acknowledge it. You were Yoda in the prequels, you got too comfortable. You knew it was odd that they closed LucasArts last year, you just didn't want to say it aloud. Disney now owns Star Wars, and they were gonna make it theirs. I know I dramatized almost all of that. But that's kind of how it felt when I learned about this. I was about 12 when Disney decided to create the Legends continuity. To be real, this was the first time I even had to learn what the word canon meant. Now, I'm not one of those Disney Star Wars haters like some are online. I do think Disney has done some good with the franchise. I mean, Andor alone is one of the best pieces of science fiction I've watched in years. But I'm not too fond of their actions restructuring Lucasfilm. Should I be surprised? In hindsight, no. Disney are basically a bunch of corpos and are essentially the Arasaka Corporation with a family-friendly marketing scheme. Part of me feels bad for a lot of the people who worked on these characters and stories. They spent years working on all their own projects and works of love, just for the big mouse to get rid of all of it. I'll be real, I might never forgive them for closing the doors of LucasArts, not only because they got rid of one of the last true innovators of games at the time, but then they also immediately gave the adaptation rights to EA and Ubisoft, two of the biggest blights to the gaming landscape since the 7th generation of consoles. But this isn't a video about nerd rage. If you want that, sorry, I don't like to be the overly negative grifter type. This is a channel I want to build on critical positivity and actual media analysis. If you're looking for that here, my bad, I just ain't that guy. No, instead, I wanted to make a small video where I sort of yap about and look back on how great a lot of the expanded universe of Star Wars really was. I'm not gonna go over literally everything. Seriously, that's about 30 years of media. I'll only cover that if you give me the secret of immortality. Instead, I'll be talking about some of my favorite games, books, characters, arcs, and more. Starting with The Force Unleashed. Man, this was one of my first Star Wars games, along with Revenge of the Sith the video game, LEGO Star Wars 1, and Battlefront 2. Though I played the PS2 version and not the 7th gen versions because I was a broke-ass, poor-ass white kid. But, not gonna lie, the PS2 version of this game was still pretty fire. I mean, these two games are pretty similar in quality, the only major difference is being some level changes and some restructuring of the content. Starkiller, or The Apprentice, was one of my favorite characters. He had that dog in him, though he was a bit of a tweaker too. He was just styling on MFs, and did he hold his lightsaber backwards? I don't care what you say, this character is appealing to me and my inner edgelord to this day. It helped that the first game's story was genuinely really solid. Is it the best Star Wars game story? Nah, I think KOTOR 1 and 2 have better stories. But those are like 50-hour RPGs, so is that really a fair comparison? But this game was so damn good. We don't talk about Force Unleashed 2 in this house though. Sorry, we don't. Speaking of incredible games, let's talk about the Star Wars Jedi Knight series, specifically Jedi Outcast and Jedi Academy. These games are made by one of the greatest FPS game studios of all time, Raven, which are now working in the Call of Duty mines. Man, I fucking hate Call of Duty. Anyways, these games, as well as their 2 predecessor games, are about the ultimate Star Wars badass Kyle Katarn. I'll put it to you like this. Kyle Katarn is the OG thug of Star Wars. If Starkiller is the Pusha T of Star Wars, then Kyle Katarn is the Cool G Rap of Star Wars. Maybe not everyone will get that analogy, but if you know, you know. These are, in my opinion, some of the best FPS games to ever be put to code. And they just so happen to have some of the best lightsaber combat in all of video games. Seriously, it's between this game and Revenge of the Sith the video game as 2 of the best examples on how to make good-ass lightsaber combat. If you don't believe me, then get the games on GOG and try them for yourself. Believe me, you'll appreciate them. Especially if you're a Star Wars fan or just a fan of retro shooters. I don't want to spend all my time talking about video games, so I'll bring up one more series. Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2. Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 are some of the best RPGs ever made. I genuinely mean that. The first one laid the blueprint for so many BioWare games after the fact. I doubt we'd even have the GOATed trilogy of Mass Effect without KOTOR 1 laying the blueprint. And KOTOR 2 was made by Obsidian in their peak. Though I will say the game was a bit rushed, but now there's a ton of fan mods that make the gameplay smooth like butter. It also helps that these games are set in one of the best eras of Star Wars. Deadass, this might be the best era of Star Wars. If you like the Clone Wars or the Legacy era, hey, I respect ya, but the Old Republic era is just so dense with so much crazy lore. I think like half of my favorite Star Wars characters come from this era alone. I mean, most days I can't really decide who's my favorite character between Darth Revan and Obi-Wan Kenobi. It helps that there were so many great books from this era. The Darth Bane trilogy alone should speak to how many great stories came out of this certain era of Star Wars. Which, let's talk about some of those books. I think we all know the expanded universe started with the Thrawn trilogy, and I'm glad to say after rereading the books after a year or so back, I can easily say that those books really do hold up. It helps that these books introduced Admiral Thrawn, who was a character so good that they barely changed him character-wise when they brought him into the Disney canon. And honestly, Thrawn might be the best villain in all of Star Wars. He's definitely up there for me with Darth Maul, Darth Vader, and Palpatine. He's just the perfect guy who knows how to plan ahead and screw with his opponents. He's the classic example of that strict fascist mindset producing cold monsters. We also got the Darth Plagueis book, and man, that's just great. This book I think represents what a lot of people love about the EU. It shows us new perspectives we wouldn't get out of the usual Star Wars films and shows, but still keeping in line with the tone of the series. Because while the Sith may have a reason for what they're doing, they're still pretty damn evil. There was also just so much good stuff, but I'm also a critically thinking person, so I want to clarify there are arcs, things, characters, etc. that a lot of people aren't gonna like. There are some pretty controversial parts of the expanded universe. I'm not gonna speak on everyone else's opinion, but I'll easily give mine. First, I want to say I'm a little mixed on the Yuuzhan Vong war stuff, but I do think there's a lot of times in this arc where it kind of gets a little too grimdark for Star Wars. The morality starts to get a little too skewed at times. Don't get me wrong, I think moral grayness is a good thing in stories, especially if you're trying to build out a long-running franchise. However, I think Star Wars handles the concept of moral grayness differently than most series. I think Andor is actually a great example of how gray morality should be handled in Star Wars. I think there's also a few times where the EU overly tries to justify the Empire's actions, and I get where people are probably coming from. There probably were good people working for the Empire, but I'm pretty sure the idea presented for the Empire is that it functions as an overall system of control and discrimination throughout the galaxy. It's meant to be a malevolent, controlling force in the universe. So the idea that Palpatine did a bunch of screwed up stuff just to prepare the galaxy to fight the Yuuzhan Vong, it just doesn't sit right with me. It feels like something you'd find more in Warhammer 40k than Star Wars. If you like that, I do get it. It's a very interesting idea for sure, but I just don't think it works for Star Wars, since Star Wars was originally based on mythological stories, heroes' journeys, and morality plays. Speaking of Palpatine, the EU also had the bright idea of reviving him. And I don't like it here either. I do think it's handled better than how The Rise of Skywalker handles it, but a bad idea is still a bad idea at the end of the day. I'm a firm believer that it's best to leave characters dead. The only time I think Star Wars ever pulled off bringing back a dead character was Darth Maul in the Clone Wars, but that's because Darth Maul was barely a character in his movie he was introduced in. The EU at times feels a little chaotic and a bit contradictory too. This isn't all the time, but there are a few times where it seems like the writers are just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. However, I also think that it's sort of its strong suit too, because what sticks really does stick. So, yeah, that's all I gotta say real quick about the Star Wars EU. Do you agree with me? Do you not? Well, hey, let me know. And while you're at it, let me know what your experiences with the Star Wars EU was too. I'd love to know. But with all that being said, hey, I'll see you next time.